I never thought I'd hear someone call 911 on me for taking back my own package, but that's exactly what happened on a quiet Tuesday morning in Maplewood Estates. I had just picked up a brown Amazon box from my front porch, my name Jason Campbell, printed clearly on the label, when Nora Hall, our glorious self-appointed HOA queen, stormed over in her pink blazer like a suburban general. "That's HOA property," she screamed, clutching her clipboard like a weapon. Before I could even blink, she was on her phone yelling, "Yes, officer, there's a man stealing from the neighborhood." Within minutes, flashing lights painted my driveway red and blue. Neighbors peeked from behind blinds, recording with their phones. I stood there holding that box, wondering how my own mail had turned into a crime scene. But what Nora didn't know, what nobody knew, was that inside that box lay something that would expose the biggest secret this HOA had ever buried. Before we dive into this wild story, drop a comment with your city and time zone, and don't forget to subscribe, because you're not going to believe what was really inside that package. Maplewood Estates was supposed to be the definition of suburban perfection. Freshly painted fences, identical mailboxes, manicured lawns, trimmed like green velvet. Every Saturday morning, the sound of sprinklers clicked in perfect sync, and the air smelled faintly of fertilizer and smugness. When I bought my home there 3 years ago, I thought I'd found peace. No traffic, no noise, no drama. But peace doesn't last long when you live under a homeowner association run by a woman like Nora Hall. To anyone driving through, Nora looked like a role model for community leadership. She was always outside, clipboard in hand, lips tight like she was perpetually tasting lemon juice. She'd walk from driveway to driveway, jotting notes, snapping pictures, sending violation notices that read more like military orders than neighborly reminders. To us residents, she was an unstoppable force of HOA bureaucracy wrapped in pastel-colored tyranny. My first real encounter with Nora was a year before all this. I was repainting my porch railing a soft gray color matching the house trim. She appeared out of nowhere like a hawk spotting prey. "That's not the approved shade," she said, flipping through a laminated color chart. "It's gray," I replied, brush in hand. "It's storm gray. Approved shade is driftwood gray, completely different tone. You'll need to repaint." And just like that, I learned that peace in Maplewood came with a color code. Still, I'm not the type to pick fights over paint. I repainted it, shrugged, and kept my distance from the HOA drama. For the most part, I worked from home designing drainage systems for small towns across the state and minded my own business. But a few months ago, little things started going missing. It began with a set of mechanical parts I'd ordered for a client prototype, expensive, custom fabricated. The tracking app said delivered at 11:04 a.m., but when I checked the porch, nothing. The carrier confirmed they'd left it by the front door. I thought maybe it was porch pirates, random theft, bad luck. Then it happened again. A box of new tools, gone. Then a small package from my daughter's university, missing too. By the fourth time, it didn't feel random anymore. I started asking around. Turns out, I wasn't the only one. Mrs. Sanders, 2 houses down, said she was missing 3 deliveries. The Millers across the street lost a new set of outdoor lights. Even old Mr. Jenkins complained his medication was delivered but never showed up. The strange part, every package disappeared after the mail truck left but before the HOA's daily patrol. That's right, Maplewood had an actual HOA inspection route, Nora's pride and joy. Every weekday at noon, she or one of her compliance assistants would walk around the neighborhood ensuring standards were upheld. She called it community observation. We called it the Karen March. I decided to ask her directly one morning. She was standing in front of her Lexus SUV clipboard at the ready, sunglasses reflecting the morning sun like mirrored shields. "Hey Nora, quick question," I started. "Have you noticed any missing packages around here?" She pursed her lips. "Packages? Oh yes. Some residents leave unsightly boxes on their porches for days. That's not allowed. I mean missing ones," I clarified. "Mine have been disappearing after delivery." She straightened up, all business. "Well, the HOA has the right to inspect any items that may violate community safety. You'd be surprised what some people order online these days." I blinked. "You're saying you open residents' mail?" She smiled, that patronizing, sugar-coated kind of smile that could curdle milk. "Don't be dramatic, Jason. We simply ensure compliance. It's all in the bylaws." "Which bylaw?" I asked. "The one that says residents must keep the neighborhood safe," she snapped. "If something looks suspicious, we investigate." There was something in her tone, something that told me she wasn't joking. That night, I dug through the HOA handbook. I flipped through 30 pages of small print about grass length, trash bin placement, and flag etiquette. But nowhere did it mention mail inspection. Still, I couldn't prove she was behind it. Not yet. So I started documenting. Every delivery, every timestamp, every disappearance. I kept a small notebook next to the doorbell. A week later, I caught something strange. At 11:06 a.m., the USPS van stopped by, dropped a box, and drove off. At 11:18, I saw Nora's Lexus pull up to the curb from my office window. She didn't even park properly, just left the engine running, hopped out, and walked straight to my porch. She looked around, grabbed the package, and walked back to her car like she'd done it 100 times. No hesitation, no shame, just pure entitlement. My jaw clenched so hard I could hear my teeth grind. I wanted to run outside, confront her, make her admit it, but I knew better. Nora was the type to twist any confrontation into an HOA violation. So I decided to play her game quietly, carefully. That evening, I installed a doorbell camera disguised as a motion sensor light. It recorded to a cloud drive silently without her knowing. Then I ordered another package, something harmless, cheap but traceable, a Bluetooth GPS tracker hidden inside a small cardboard box labeled Jason Campbell, private equipment. Then I waited. 2 days later, right on schedule, the USPS dropped it off. 15 minutes later, Nora's Lexus arrived. She did the same thing again, walked straight up, took it, and drove off. I watched through the camera feed on my phone, a mix of satisfaction and fury bubbling up. When she left the neighborhood, I opened the tracker app. The signal pinged just a few hundred feet away behind the HOA clubhouse. There was a storage shed there, small white with a faded sign that said maintenance. I'd always assumed it was full of lawnmowers or cleaning supplies, but now it had a blinking red dot on my screen. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a stolen package. It was something bigger, organized, intentional. Still, I needed confirmation. So I reached out to someone I could trust, Mark Davis, my next-door neighbor and a retired postal worker. Mark was one of the few people in Maplewood who'd ever stood up to Nora and survived. He once got fined for having a non-conforming mailbox, fought it in county court, and won. I showed him the footage and the tracker data. He let out a low whistle. "That's not good," he said. "You're not the only one, Jason. I've had half a dozen people ask me about missing deliveries this month. If she's keeping them, that's mail tampering. Federal offense." "Think she'd risk that?" I asked. He looked at me. Power does funny things to people, especially when nobody stops them. We made a plan. Tomorrow night we'd check out that shed. Carefully, quietly, no confrontation until we knew for sure. That night I lay awake, replaying the footage in my mind, Nora's confident stride, her hand gripping my box like it was hers. The woman who once fined me for a misplaced trash can was now possibly stealing mail from half the neighborhood. The HOA had rules for everything, grass, fences, porch lights, but apparently not for basic decency. I didn't know it yet, but what Mark and I would find inside that shed would turn our quiet little neighborhood into a federal crime scene, and it all started with one missing package. When the clock hit 11 p.m., Maplewood Estates was silent, the kind of silence only expensive neighborhoods could afford. Sprinklers hissed like snakes, porch lights glowed on identical driveways, and the world looked too peaceful for the kind of trouble brewing behind that HOA clubhouse. I slipped on my dark jacket and met Mark Davis by the corner mailbox. He carried a small flashlight, and that cautious grin of his, the kind you get when you've worked for the Postal Service for 30 years and seen more fraud than friendship. "Ready," he whispered. "Ready," I said, though my heartbeat was far from calm. We walked quietly along the back trail that curved behind the tennis courts. Crickets sang. The smell of cut grass hung thick in the humid air. Ahead, the maintenance shed loomed in the dim glow of a single security bulb, its paint peeling the HOA logo half-faded like a forgotten promise. "This it?" I asked. "Yep," Mark said. "Postal records show it's been there since the 90 seconds. Never listed for storage, though. HOA added it without a permit." Of course they did. We crouched near the door. The lock wasn't heavy-duty, just a standard padlock, the kind you could buy at a hardware store. Mark pulled out a small pick tool from his pocket. "You used to do this for work," I whispered. "Mailmen see a lot," he said with a wink, and within seconds the lock popped open with a soft click. The door creaked as I pushed it slowly. The smell hit first dust cardboard and the faint metallic tang of old electronics. Then we saw it, stacks of packages, dozens, maybe hundreds, lined up from floor to ceiling. Some were still sealed, others torn open and retaped. Boxes from Amazon, USPS, FedEx, all mixed together. Names of half the neighborhood written on them in black marker. I felt my stomach drop. "What the hell?" I murmured. Mark shone the flashlight over a shelf. There were envelopes, too, bank statements, utility bills, insurance letters, even medical records. Some opened, some copied. He pointed at a pile of folders in the corner. Look, credit union forms. I stepped closer. They weren't just forms, they were loan applications, mortgage approvals, and identity verification documents, all filled out using the names of residents. Except the signatures didn't match. Someone's been forging people's information, I said. That's not just theft. That's federal fraud, Mark finished grimly. This is bigger than I thought. We both froze when a car door slammed in the distance. Lights off, I whispered. We crouched behind a stack of boxes. A pair of headlights swept across the shed's side wall. Through a crack in the door, I saw the unmistakable figure of Nora Hall wearing her trademark pink blazer heels clicking on the pavement. She wasn't alone. A man in a black hoodie followed her, someone I hadn't seen before. He carried a cardboard box under one arm and handed her a clipboard. She signed something, then passed him a white envelope that looked far too thick to be a receipt. Mark leaned close, whispering, "That's a drop-off. A drop-off for what, money laundering, identity trade? Who knows? She's not doing this alone." Nora opened the shed door, halfway reached inside, and stacked the new box on top of the others. For a moment, her flashlight beam landed on the same pile of folders we'd been examining. Then, as if sensing something, she paused. Her head turned slightly. My breath caught in my throat. After a few long seconds, she muttered something to the man, closed the door, and walked away. The car started, headlights fading into the night. Mark exhaled. That was close. I nodded, wiping sweat from my forehead. We need proof. Enough to take to the feds. So we did what any sensible man would do. We started filming. I recorded everything with my phone camera, panning slowly across the shed, the stacks of stolen mail, the fake forms, the HOA stickers slapped onto boxes like official seals. Mark read out loud the names and dates as evidence. Then I spotted something on the far shelf, a small cardboard box labeled Campbell Private Inspection. That was mine. I grabbed it, cut the tape open, and inside found something that didn't belong to me at all. A flash drive wrapped in a folded HOA memo. The memo read, "Deliver to NH directly. Contains resident data for batch 3 verification." Mark looked at me. "Resident data? What the hell is batch 3? I pocketed the drive. "Whatever it is, it's going to the authorities." We closed the shed, locked it again, and slipped away through the shadows. Neither of us spoke until we reached my driveway. Mark turned to me. "Jason, be careful. She's the kind of person who'll destroy anyone that threatens her image. Don't confront her yet. Go through the postal inspector's office. Quietly." "I will," I promised. But the next morning, before I could even send the email, there was a sharp knock on my front door. When I opened it, Nora Hall stood there, clipboard in hand, face set in that familiar righteous fury. "Good morning, Mr. Campbell," she said sweetly. "We need to discuss a serious HOA violation." I kept my expression neutral. "What kind of violation?" She flipped through her papers theatrically. "Unauthorized surveillance. You've installed recording equipment facing community property. That's a breach of privacy and HOA Ordinance Section 12. "You mean my doorbell camera?" I asked. "Yes," she snapped. "You've been recording people without permission." I crossed my arms, including the people stealing my mail. Her smile faltered for half a second. "Baseless accusation. I expect your compliance. Remove the device or face daily fines." I stared at her, amused by how predictable she was. "You sure you want to make this official?" "I'm always official," she hissed, and handed me a yellow citation slip before strutting back toward her Lexus. As soon as she was gone, I looked at the notice. At the bottom where signatures went, I saw something strange, a second signature in faint ink initials I didn't recognize, DM. Mark later told me he'd seen those initials before on some of the fraudulent documents in the shed. Whoever DM was, they were helping Nora forge papers. That night, I examined the flash drive. It was encrypted, but the first folder that opened contained spreadsheets, rows of names, addresses, bank routing numbers. Some columns marked approved, others pending. My blood ran cold when I saw my own name listed under Phase 4, property conversion. Property conversion. They weren't just stealing mail, they were preparing to transfer home ownership titles into a shell company under the HOA's name. Nora wasn't just nosy. She was orchestrating a full-blown identity and property fraud operation. I didn't sleep that night. I copied all the files, uploaded them to cloud storage, and printed screenshots. By morning, I'd made my decision. It was time to confront her. I wasn't going to play defense anymore. She wanted to play by HOA law. Fine. I'd show her what federal law looked like. The next day, a new package arrived on my porch, plain brown, no return address. I waited. I knew she'd come. And right on cue, just before noon, I saw her Lexus roll up again. This time I was waiting outside. As her heel touched the first step, I said, "Morning, Nora. Forgot something yesterday." She froze, startled. "Jason, this is an HOA inspection." I held up my phone showing the live camera feed of her from last week. "You mean like this inspection?" Her expression flickered from shock to rage. "You can't record me without authorization." "Funny," I said. "Neither can you steal from me without prison time." She lunged for the package, shouting, "That's HOA property." I caught it first, gripping the box tightly. "No, Nora, it's mine, and so is the evidence inside." Her voice cracked as she screamed, "I'm calling 911, and she did right there on my lawn, yelling into her phone about a dangerous man threatening community order. By the time the police arrived, half the neighborhood was outside watching, but this time I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Because that box she was trying to steal, it contained printed copies of every file from that flash drive, and they were about to change everything. When the police car rolled away from my driveway that day, its lights fading down Maplewood Drive, I stood there with the box still in my hands. The officers hadn't arrested anyone, they'd just taken statements and advised us both to work things out civilly, typical suburban diplomacy. But as I watched Nora Hall march back to her Lexus with her usual self-righteous fury, I knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The officers might not have cared, but I had something they didn't proof. And the more I thought about that flash drive and those files, the more something gnawed at me. There were hundreds of residents in Maplewood Estates. What if they were all targets? What if their mail identities, even their homes, were being stolen one spreadsheet at a time? Mark stopped by that evening, carrying 2 mugs of coffee and a cautious smile. "You okay, Jason?" "I will be," I said, setting the box on my table. "We've got enough evidence to make this real. I'm sending it to the postal inspector tonight." He nodded slowly. "You should, but just in case. Let's back it up again. Nora's the kind of woman who doesn't go down quietly." He was right. That night, while the rest of Maplewood slept, I uploaded everything: videos, spreadsheets, photographs onto 3 different cloud drives and 1 encrypted USB stick that I kept inside my toolbox. The last thing I needed was for it to disappear like everyone's packages. Still, part of me couldn't shake the curiosity. I wanted to see the operation with my own eyes again, this time in daylight, without shadows or doubt. So the next morning I grabbed my phone, got into my truck and parked near the clubhouse. I sat there pretending to read a newspaper while watching the maintenance shed across the lot. At 10:42 a.m. sharp, Nora's Lexus arrived. She stepped out in heels and pearls like she was attending a board meeting, not running a criminal enterprise. 2 men were already waiting by the shed, both wearing plain clothes, one carrying a briefcase. They weren't HOA staff, I'd never seen them before. They opened the shed and I saw the interior for the first time in daylight. My stomach tightened. The place looked less like a storage unit and more like a distribution center. Rows of shelves filled with labeled boxes, clipboards hanging from hooks, a small table with a printer, tape gun, and even a laptop connected to a portable Wi-Fi router. This wasn't petty theft. It was organized. I angled my phone camera through the windshield and hit record. Nora pointed at several boxes, handed one of the men a small envelope, and they loaded a few packages into the trunk of a gray van with no logo. When the van left, Nora locked the shed and headed inside the clubhouse. That was enough for me. I sent the footage to Mark with 1 line: "It's bigger than we thought. Call your contact." He did. By noon, a postal inspector named Agent Ramirez called me directly. Calm voice, precise questions. He'd already heard of Nora. Apparently there had been complaints from other neighborhoods tied to similar missing mail incidents. "I need you to keep everything as it is," he said. "Don't confront her again. We're coordinating with federal investigators." I agreed mostly. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. 2 days later, when Nora suddenly scheduled an emergency HOA meeting for all residents, I knew something was off. She'd never called a meeting without 2 weeks' notice. The email said mandatory attendance, discussion regarding community safety, compliance violations, and potential legal threats. I could practically hear the venom dripping from her words. When I arrived at the clubhouse that evening, the parking lot was packed. Dozens of neighbors crowded inside, murmuring anxiously. Nora stood at the podium in front of her clipboard, replaced by a microphone. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," she began, her tone dripping with fake sincerity. "I'm deeply troubled by the recent wave of rumors and accusations circulating within our community. False claims about mail theft, fraud, and conspiracy are damaging the reputation of Maplewood Estates." She turned her gaze directly at me. "Certain residents," she said, "pointedly have chosen to defame this association through illegal surveillance and fabricated evidence. Tonight we're here to address these lies once and for all. Whispers rippled through the crowd. I didn't move. I wanted to see where she was going. Nora clicked a remote, and a projector displayed a screenshot of my doorbell footage, the same one showing her taking my package. Only this version had been edited. It stopped right before she picked up the box, then cut to a black screen with a timestamp mismatch. You see, she said smoothly this footage was manipulated to incriminate me. It's an unfortunate example of how misinformation can spread when residents disregard proper channels. I could almost hear Mark grinding his teeth beside me. That's bold, I muttered. Reckless, he corrected. Before she could continue, I stood up. If you're done lying, I have something to share. Her eyes narrowed. Mr. Campbell, this is an official HOA meeting. You'll speak when recognized. I'll take my chances. I walked up to the projector, unplugged her laptop, and inserted my own flash drive. The screen blinked, then filled with the real footage. Nora taking boxes from porches, loading them into her car, entering the shed. The date stamps matched perfectly. Gasps erupted across the room. Nora froze. That's illegally obtained. I clicked to the next slide, the spreadsheets from the flash drive. Rows of names, bank account numbers. The HOA's financial transactions funneled into an account marked Maplewood Compliance Fund, Shellco. You weren't keeping the neighborhood safe, I said, my voice echoing. You were running a mail fraud ring under the HOA's name. Pandemonium broke out. People stood, shouted questions, some demanded resignations. Mark slipped to the back and quietly texted someone. Nora slammed her hand on the podium. Enough, this meeting is adjourned. Before she could leave, the doors opened. 2 men in dark suits stepped in. They weren't residents. They flashed badges. U.S. Postal Inspection Service. Mrs. Hall one said calmly, "You're under investigation for mail theft, wire fraud, and identity falsification. Please step aside." The room went dead silent. She stammered, "This is ridiculous. This is harassment." But when they opened her briefcase and pulled out several envelopes with resident names and uncashed checks inside, even her closest supporters looked away. They read her Miranda rights right there in front of the whole community. She was still shouting as they escorted her out. "You'll regret this, Campbell. You think you're a hero, but you're nothing. You're nothing." The door slammed. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Then, slow clapping started from Mrs. Sanders of all people. Then another. Then half the room erupted in applause. Mark leaned over and whispered, "I told you she wouldn't go down quietly." I looked around at the neighbors, some cheering, others crying in disbelief. "It's not over yet," I said. "If Nora was running this, someone else was helping her, and I'm going to find out who." Because in the corner of that spreadsheet, down in the approved by column 1, set of initials kept appearing DM, and something told me Nora Hall wasn't the mastermind after all. You'd think that after a public arrest, things in Maplewood Estates would finally quiet down. But peace, I was learning, doesn't come easy when you've lived under a dictatorship disguised as an HOA. For a few days, the neighborhood was buzzing. People whispered on sidewalks, gathered in driveways, compared stories. Packages started reappearing. Some left anonymously on porches. Others dumped near the clubhouse as if the thief was trying to erase the evidence. Nora Hall's arrest was the talk of the county. Local news vans rolled through snapping photos of our perfect lawns and imperfect secrets. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't finished. For one thing, Nora wasn't in jail. At least not yet. The postal inspectors had taken her in for questioning, but because she was only under investigation, she was released pending further charges. And if there was one thing worse than a powerful HOA president, it was a cornered one. So when I saw her Lexus reappear outside my house 3 days later, my stomach sank. It was just past noon, sunlight glaring off her windshield. She stepped out wearing a pale blue suit, this time hair perfectly curled, clipboard still in hand, like nothing had happened. "Afternoon, Jason," she called out sweetly, her voice dripping with artificial charm. "We need to discuss your repeated violations." "Violations?" I asked, standing on my porch with folded arms. Pretty sure I'm up to code unless exposing a criminal enterprise counts. She smiled, that sharp, condescending grin she'd perfected over years of power trips. "Your sarcastic tone is duly noted. But according to HOA Section 14, all community members must cooperate with ongoing audits. That includes surrendering any unlawfully obtained materials. I'm here to collect them." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. "You mean the evidence you got arrested for?" Her expression tightened. "Allegedly arrested. And I'd be careful throwing around such defamatory language. You may not realize this, Jason, but the HOA board still legally recognizes me as interim president until a formal vote." "Pretty sure the FBI doesn't recognize that bylaw," I said, stepping closer. That's when I noticed something tucked under her arm, a small, brown box. Funny, I said. You brought a package. Thought you didn't do deliveries anymore. Her smirk deepened. Oh, it's for you. A formal notice of property reassessment. I could feel the hairs on my neck rise. A reassessment, yes. Based on certain financial irregularities discovered in your homeowner file. It seems there's been some question about the original deed transfer. I laughed in disbelief. You're kidding. Not at all. According to our records, this lot may actually fall under community jurisdiction. If that's the case, you could owe significant back fees. Of course, she added, lowering her voice. I could help smooth things over if you return the USB drives and documents you stole. I stared at her for a long moment. Then I said quietly, You forged those documents, Nora. I've seen them. Every fake signature, every false account. Her eyes flickered just for a second. You don't know what you're talking about. I stepped off the porch. No, I do. And so does Agent Ramirez. You really want to play this game again? She raised her chin defiantly. Don't test me, Jason. You're tampering with HOA property and federal investigations. One phone call and you'll be in handcuffs. You already tried that, remember I said. Her jaw clenched. Then I'll try again. And before I could say another word, she pulled out her phone, dialed 911, and started yelling loud enough for half the block to hear. Yes. Hello, I need the police immediately. There's a dangerous man threatening me outside his home. He's refusing to return stolen property belonging to the Maplewood Homeowners Association. Neighbors peeked from their windows again, just like before. Some even stepped out onto their lawns, cameras ready. I looked at her and shook my head. You never learn. Within minutes, a patrol car pulled up. 2 officers stepped out, same pair as last time. One recognized me immediately. Afternoon, Mr. Campbell, Officer Riley said tiredly. Another dispute. You could say that, I replied. Same package, same woman, same lie. Nora turned on the dramatics. Officer, he's withholding confidential HOA documents. Those belong to the community, not him. The officer looked at me. You have any proof they're yours? I held up the package she'd brought. Actually, yes. She just tried to serve me this. You might want to check what's inside. Riley sighed, took the box, and opened it carefully. Inside wasn't any reassessment notice. It was a stack of blank HOA fine slips pre-signed with Nora's initials and several USB drives labeled with residents' names. The second officer whistled softly. Looks like someone's been printing their own violations. Nora's face went pale. That's not mine. He planted that. Then why's your signature on every one? I asked calmly. For a moment, everything went quiet except the sound of cicadas humming in the summer heat. Then Riley turned to me. Mr. Campbell, we'll take this as additional evidence. You're free to go inside. Nora's voice cracked. You can't do this. I'm the HOA president. Riley looked at her, unimpressed. Ma'am, that's not a government position. She screamed as they led her toward the curb for questioning again. You'll regret this, Jason. You think this is over. You don't even know who you're dealing with. And then she said something that sent a chill down my spine. DM doesn't forgive mistakes. The name hit me like a cold wave. DM. The initials I'd seen in every spreadsheet, every forged document. Whoever they were, Nora clearly answered to them. After the police drove away with her, I stood alone on my porch, staring at the quiet houses, the trimmed hedges, the fake peace of Maplewood Estates. I called Mark immediately. She said DM again, I told him. It's not her acting alone. There's someone above her. Mark was silent for a moment. Then he said, You'd better sit down for this. Ramirez called me an hour ago. They traced some of the financial accounts linked to those fake HOA funds, and they lead to a company registered in Delaware called Dominion Management LLC. Guess who signed the incorporation papers? I already knew the answer. DM. Yeah, Mark said grimly. And get this, it's not just Maplewood. There are 6 other HOAs across the state under that company's control. Same bylaws, same complaint patterns, same missing mail reports. A chill crept down my back. So this isn't just fraud, it's a network. Exactly, he said. And we think Nora was one of several local managers. The real boss is still out there. I looked across the street at the identical houses lined up like soldiers. A car drove past slowly, windows tinted black. It paused for a second near my mailbox, before continuing down the road. Mark, I said quietly, I think they already know I'm next. He didn't argue. Lock your doors, Jason, and don't go near the clubhouse again until the feds say so. That night, I sat by my window watching every passing car. Every pair of headlights felt like eyes. The suburban perfection of Maplewood suddenly looked like a movie set too neat, too quiet, too rehearsed. At 11:47 p.m., my doorbell camera pinged. Movement detected. I opened the live feed and froze. Two figures stood near the maintenance shed, their flashlights darting inside. One of them was clearly Nora, hair tied back, moving with desperate speed. The other was a tall man in a dark coat. I couldn't see his face, but on his shoulder, embroidered in faint white letters, were the initials DM. The man handed Nora something metallic, a lighter. She flicked it once, twice. My blood ran cold. They were going to burn the evidence. I grabbed my keys and ran for the truck. Not tonight, I muttered. Not in my neighborhood. Because if Nora wanted to erase her crimes, she was about to find out that some fires only make the truth brighter. By the time I tore out of my driveway, tires spitting gravel down Maplewood Drive, the night sky had swallowed the neighborhood in that heavy pre-storm stillness that makes every sound echo twice. My headlights cut across perfect lawns and identical mailboxes until I turned the corner toward the clubhouse. And there they were, Nora Hall and the mysterious man marked DM, crouched by the maintenance shed, flashlights bouncing off the white siding. Smoke curled from the corner where a metal trash can burned faintly, filling the air with the sharp tang of melting plastic and paper. My stomach twisted. They were burning the evidence. I slammed the truck into park and jumped out. "Hey," I shouted, running toward them. "Step away from that shed." Nora whipped around, eyes wide, face lit orange from the fire. "Jason, don't," she screamed, but it wasn't a warning, it was pure anger. The man beside her turned slowly. He was taller than I expected, broad shoulders, close-cropped hair, a smooth, unreadable face. Even from 20 feet away, I could see the faint glint of a gun holster under his jacket. "Mr. Campbell," he said, voice low and steady. "You shouldn't be here." I froze mid-step. "You know my name," he smiled, small and cold. "You've made quite a mess for us." Nora dropped the lighter panic in her voice. "Derek, we can fix this, just burn it all. No one will believe him after tonight, DM." Derek turned his glare on her. "You've already failed once. I don't tolerate failure." For a second, I thought he might actually pull the trigger. That's when I heard the faint wail of a siren somewhere in the distance. Relief flooded through me like electricity. Mark must have called the police when my doorbell camera triggered again. I took a slow step backward, raising my phone. "You're being recorded, Derek. Everything you say is going straight to federal storage." He chuckled, adjusting his cufflinks. "You think you're some kind of hero, Jason. You're an engineer who got lucky with a camera. This is business. The HOA's just a front, a tool, nothing personal." He turned back to the fire, picked up a box marked Maplewood Financial Records and tossed it into the flames. Papers curled, blackened, and vanished in seconds. "Stop!" I yelled, rushing forward. But Nora suddenly grabbed my arm nails, digging into my sleeve. "You ruined everything. Do you know what you've done?" I shoved her off, just as the first patrol car screeched into the parking lot, sirens cutting through the thick air. Blue and red lights splashed across the clubhouse wall. Derek stepped back, calm as ever. He raised his hands in mock surrender, letting the burning papers illuminate his smirk. "Too late," he said quietly. "Evidence is gone. You can't prove a thing." But what he didn't know was that the doorbell camera had been streaming live the entire time. Every second, every threat, every word was being saved to cloud storage. Two officers leapt from the car, shouting commands. Nora stumbled backward, shouting hysterically, "It's him! He's the one who started the fire." "Yeah," I muttered, classic Nora. The officers quickly disarmed the situation, separating us. One of them cuffed Nora, who kept screaming about HOA property rights, while the other tried to question Derek. But before they could even reach him, a black SUV roared into the lot and stopped inches from the burning shed. 3 men in suits stepped out. "Federal agents," one shouted. "Put your hands where we can see them," I blinked in shock. Agent Ramirez himself climbed out of the passenger seat, his face hard with determination. "Mr. Campbell," he said, nodding toward me. "We've got it from here." The officers stepped aside as Ramirez's team surrounded Derek. "Derek Matthews," he announced. "Formally, you're under arrest for mail fraud, identity theft, and obstruction of a federal investigation." Derek didn't flinch. He just smiled faintly. "You're too late. Everything's already off-site." Ramirez leaned in close. "We'll see about that." As they led him toward the SUV, Nora shrieked, "You promised me protection. You said it would all be erased." Derek didn't look back. He simply said, "And you believed me. That's your mistake." It was surreal watching the queen of the HOA crumble like that makeup-smeared heels sinking into wet grass mascara streaking down her face. For years, she'd made every homeowner in Maplewood feel small. Now she looked smaller than all of us. The agents quickly put out the fire, stamping the last of the burning files into wet ash. Ramirez approached me, handing over a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a half-melted flash drive. "Good thing you made backups," he said. I exhaled shakily. "So it's over." He gave a tired smile. "For Nora, maybe. For Derek's organization, not quite. Dominion Management's been laundering money through at least 6 HOAs across 3 states. Maplewood's just one piece of the puzzle. My jaw tightened. You'll get them right. Oh, we will, Ramirez said. Thanks to you, we've got enough to start connecting the dots. You did good, Jason. Really good. The next morning, Maplewood Estates woke up to chaos. Yellow tape wrapped around the clubhouse. Reporters lined the sidewalks, microphones out, trying to interview anyone who'd talk. Words like federal raid fraud network and mail conspiracy were splashed across headlines. Neighbors I barely knew stopped me on my morning walk, some thanking me, others just staring in disbelief. You really did it, Mrs. Sanders said, shaking her head. All that time we thought she was just bossy. Turns out she was also embezzling your HOA fees, I replied dryly. But not everyone was thrilled. That evening I found a note slipped under my door. No return name, just 3 words printed in neat black ink, Dominion never forgets. I stared at it for a long time, the edges curling slightly under my fingertips. The following week, Agent Ramirez called to debrief me. He confirmed that Derek Matthews was indeed the founder of Dominion Management, a shell company built to control multiple HOAs' siphon funds and forge property deeds to transfer ownership to offshore accounts. Nora had been one of several regional partners, using her position to identify vulnerable residents and redirect their personal data. She would have taken your house next, Ramirez said matter-of-factly. That flash drive you found contained falsified documents, naming Dominion as co-owner of your parcel. They planned to force a foreclosure, then buy it back under the HOA's expansion plan. I sat there numb. So I was right. They were trying to steal my father's property. Ramirez nodded. You saved more people than you realize. After we hung up, I walked outside to the edge of my driveway. The street was quiet again. The lawns were still perfect. The houses looked the same, but everything had changed. A few days later, the HOA board officially dissolved under federal order. Nora's Lexus was repossessed, her house listed for auction. The clubhouse, once her stage of power, was sealed shut with a bright red sticker that read, "Federal Property, Under Investigation." Mark and I stood there watching workers remove the old HOA sign. Well, he said, sipping his coffee, guess we're finally free. For now, I said. Dominion's still out there. He gave me a sideways grin. Then let's stay ready. We did. Together we helped organize a neighborhood committee, not an HOA, just volunteers to keep things running. The new rule was simple transparency first, always. And me, I went back to work, but every time a delivery truck rolled up, I couldn't help but smile a little. I still checked the porch cameras religiously, but this time not out of fear, out of habit. One afternoon, a small brown package arrived, no sender listed. I hesitated before picking it up, half expecting another trap. But inside was a single flash drive and a note for when the next one falls. R. Agent Ramirez, I guessed. I plugged it into my computer. It was a database names of HOA presidents, addresses, and hidden accounts across several states. Dominion's web still alive, still moving. I knew what that meant. This wasn't just a story about one neighborhood. It was the beginning of something much bigger. I closed the laptop, looked out my window at the calm streets of Maplewood, and said quietly, if they come for me again, they'll find I'm not the same man they fooled before. Because sometimes the cleanest neighborhoods hide the dirtiest crimes, and this time I was ready to fight back. 2 weeks after the federal raid, Maplewood Estates no longer felt like the same place. The lawns were still neat, the fences still straight, and the air still smelled faintly of fresh mulch and paranoia, but the illusion of perfection had shattered. Everywhere I went, people whispered. Some thanked me, calling me the guy who stopped the HOA mafia. Others avoided me entirely, as if proximity to the truth might drag them into it too. The clubhouse remained sealed with yellow tape, and the HOA's bank accounts were frozen pending federal investigation. For the first time in years, there were no fines, no citations, no warnings about unsightly garbage bins. You'd think peace would finally settle in, but in Maplewood, peace never lasted long. It started with the phone calls. At first, I thought they were telemarketers. Then I noticed the numbers, different area codes, same pattern. Each one left the same voicemail. A man's voice distorted by static. You think you stopped us. You only burned one branch. Dominion grows back. I forwarded the recordings to Agent Ramirez, who promised to trace them. But his voice on the phone sounded uneasy, like even he wasn't sure how deep this went. By the end of the week, a black SUV began idling near the edge of the neighborhood, unmarked tinted windows, the kind that screamed watch list. It didn't move, didn't park illegally, just sat there. Mark noticed it too. Maybe they're feds, he said one morning, squinting through his binoculars. Or Dominion, I replied. Same difference at this point. He laughed softly. Careful, Jason. You're starting to sound like a man who's seen behind the curtain. I have, I said, staring down the street where the SUV sat like a shadow that refused to blink. And I didn't like what was back there. Meanwhile, Nora Hall had gone silent. After her arrest, she'd been transferred to a federal detention facility pending trial, but then nothing. No updates, no appearances, no mugshot leaks. A rumor spread that she'd made a deal to reduce her sentence. Another claimed she'd been moved into witness protection. I didn't believe either. Nora wasn't the type to cooperate. She was the type to plot. Then one morning I received a certified letter. No return address. Just my name written in looping cursive that made my gut twist with recognition. Inside was a single page. You think you're the hero, Jason, but Dominion isn't done with Maplewood. Look closer at what they're building behind your father's land. You missed something. N.H. For a moment I stood frozen in my kitchen, the paper trembling in my hands. Behind my father's land, my father's property bordered a patch of undeveloped woods just outside the HOA boundary, the last untouched acre before city zoning began. I'd always assumed it was worthless scrubland. Until that moment. That afternoon I drove out there. The dirt path was overgrown but familiar. My dad used to bring me here to hunt for wild blackberries when I was a kid. At the edge of the property, where the trees thinned out, I saw something new: survey stakes. Bright orange, freshly hammered into the ground. Each one marked DM, Property Holdings. I crouched down, tracing the letters with my thumb. Dominion Management. The same shell company. They were expanding. I pulled out my phone and started recording. The stakes led in a line toward a clearing where a large metal container sat half buried in the dirt. A padlock sealed it shut. Inside, something hummed faintly. For a moment I thought about calling Ramirez immediately, but curiosity won. I circled the container, found a small ventilation grate, and shone my flashlight inside. Rows of servers blinked in the darkness, dozens of them stacked neatly, lights, pulsing like artificial fireflies. Dominion wasn't just laundering money, they were storing data. I backed away, slowly, pulse hammering. That flash drive Nora had tried to burn, those spreadsheets, they weren't just about Maplewood. They were fragments of something bigger, something digital, something alive. Just as I reached my truck, I heard the crunch of tires behind me. The same black SUV rolled up, stopping halfway down the path. The driver's window lowered and a familiar voice called out, "Mr. Campbell, you've been busy." It was Derek Matthews. Except this time he wasn't in a suit. He was dressed like a contractor, reflective vest, clipboard, sunglasses, and he wasn't alone. Two men stepped out behind him, each carrying a crowbar. "Thought you were in custody," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He smiled faintly. "You know how it is. Good lawyers. Technicalities." "You're trespassing," I said. "Correction," he said. "This land belongs to Dominion Holdings. You're the trespasser now." I looked down at the survey stake again. My father's name had been scratched off in small print at the bottom, replaced with a digital stamp. "I know you forged that," I said. "You can't just—" He raised a hand. "Jason, you don't get it. Dominion isn't a scam. It's a system. We build order where chaos reigns. You think HOAs are about lawns and fences. They're about control. And control is money." Behind him, one of the men unlocked the container, revealing the rows of servers inside. Cool air hissed out. "This is Maplewood's legacy," Derek continued. "Every homeowner's data, tax records, bank accounts, identities, all cataloged, managed, perfected. You exposed the first stage, sure, but stage 2's already live. Across the state." I stepped closer, anger flaring. "You're stealing people's lives." He smirked. "We're organizing them." Before I could reply, a voice shouted from the woods. "Federal agents, drop your weapons." Agent Ramirez emerged with a tactical team, rifles drawn, badges glinting. Derek barely flinched. "Took you long enough," he said. The men with crowbars tried to run, but were tackled immediately. Ramirez approached Derek, eyes burning. "You didn't think we'd track the signal from those servers. We've had them pinging your satellite uplink for days." For the first time, Derek's composure cracked. "You can't stop Dominion," he hissed. "It's already replicated. You shut this one down, 10 more go online," maybe, Ramirez said, "but you won't be around to see it." As the agents cuffed him, I looked back at the container. One of the servers sparked, flickered, and then went dark. Ramirez turned to me. "You shouldn't have come out here alone, Jason." I shrugged. "Would you have believed me otherwise?" He smiled tiredly. "Fair point." 2 hours later, the clearing was swarming with federal vehicles. Technicians unplugged servers, agents photographed documents, and one by one Dominion's digital heart was dismantled. As the last of the equipment was loaded into trucks, Ramirez approached me again. "We found something you'll want to see," he said, handing me a folder. Inside were scanned property deeds, dozens of them. My father's was at the top. Dominion had tried to transfer ownership to a holding trust weeks before Nora's arrest. "You were their prototype," he said quietly. "The first test case. If they could take your property, they'd move to the next HOA and the next, until they owned entire communities through forged paperwork." I let out a shaky laugh. "Guess they picked the wrong engineer. Guess they did." When I got home that night, the streetlights flickered like Morse code, and for the first time since all this began, Maplewood felt calm. But as I sat on my porch watching the shadows stretch across the cul-de-sac, I thought about Derek's last words. "You can't stop Dominion." Maybe he was right. Maybe they'd rebuild somewhere else, under a new name, a new HOA, a new smiling face with a clipboard. But at least here, for now, the fight was over. I reached for my coffee, looked up at the quiet rows of houses, and whispered, "Not in my neighborhood." Because even if Dominion grew back, they'd know one thing: Jason Campbell was still watching. The morning after the Dominion servers were hauled away, Maplewood Estates looked like a ghost town, dressed in perfect symmetry. Every window was closed, every curtain drawn, and every neighbor avoided eye contact. The HOA sign that once displayed pride and community now stood bare, its paint stripped by the FBI during evidence collection. I sat on my porch, sipping coffee, trying to process the quiet. For the first time in months, there were no fines taped to doors. No HOA patrol cars circling, no Nora Hall with her clipboard measuring lawn heights. Just silence and the faint hum of normal life returning. But peace didn't feel like I thought it would. When you spend months fighting something poisonous that hides behind a smiling face and a logo, peace doesn't arrive like sunlight. It feels like an echo of everything you lost. Mark Davis joined me later that morning. He looked 10 years younger now that the war was over, or at least this battle. He leaned on the porch railing and let out a long sigh. "Never thought I'd see Maplewood without that witch running things." "Yeah," I said. "Almost doesn't feel real." He chuckled. "Careful, Jason. Sounds like you miss her." I smirked. "Miss her? Not exactly, but I'll admit, it's strange when the villain disappears. You start wondering what to do with all the anger that kept you going." He nodded thoughtfully, taking a sip from his thermos. "Guess that's the trick, huh? Turning anger into something useful." We stood in silence for a while, watching a postal truck pull into the street. The driver, new guy, young, smiling, delivered mail to every house without hesitation. No one hovered, no one inspected, just mail doing what it's supposed to do. That sight alone almost made everything worth it. Almost. Later that day, Agent Ramirez stopped by. He looked exhausted, but satisfied, the kind of tired only justice can cause. "We finished processing Dominion's equipment," he told me. "Your father's land is officially restored in your name, completely clean." I shook his hand. "You have no idea what that means to me." "Oh, I do," he said. "You wouldn't believe how many people out there are still fighting HOAs like yours. Dominion wasn't the only one. But thanks to your footage, we've got leads in 5 states. We're shutting them down one by one." "That's good to hear," I said. He hesitated before leaving. "Jason, Dominion may rebuild, maybe under another name. But if they do, they'll avoid anywhere your name's connected to. You made enough noise to scare them off for good." I smiled faintly. "Good. Let them remember." When Ramirez left, I wandered to the edge of my property. The old fence still bore the faint scorch marks from the night Nora tried to burn the evidence. Beyond it, my father's land stretched out, untamed, wild, beautiful. It was the last piece of my family untouched by suburban rules or HOA greed. That night, I built a new sign and planted it near the fence. It read, "Private land. No trespassing, no HOA jurisdiction, petty maybe." But after everything, I figured I'd earned the right. 2 weeks later, we held a community meeting, not in the clubhouse, which was still under federal seal, but on my lawn. Mark called it the Real HOA, short for Honest Owners Alliance. About 30 people showed up carrying lawn chairs and homemade cookies instead of clipboards. Mrs. Sanders brought lemonade. Mr. Jenkins made a joke about how nobody finds anyone if the cookies aren't gluten-free. For the first time, laughter filled Maplewood again, unforced, unmonitored. We voted to dissolve the old HOA permanently and form a voluntary neighborhood trust. No fines, no power plays, just residents looking out for one another. We even made Mark interim treasurer, not that anyone cared about titles anymore. The sense of freedom was strange, exhilarating, and a little bittersweet. Halfway through the meeting, a mail truck stopped by and handed me an envelope. Handwritten, no return address. Inside was a single photo. It showed Nora Hall in an orange jumpsuit, handcuffed, walking through a courthouse hallway. On the back, someone had scrawled a note in neat block letters: justice delivered. Case closed. R. Ramirez again, I assumed. I passed the photo to Mark, who chuckled softly. Fitting ending, don't you think, maybe I said, but I doubt it's the last we'll hear of Dominion. He raised an eyebrow. You really think they'll come back? I glanced toward the horizon where the sun dipped behind rows of perfect rooftops. People like that always do. They hide behind something new, another HOA, another company, another lie. But next time someone else will catch them. Maybe someone like us. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I sat alone under the porch light. The air smelled of cut grass and rain, and for the first time I felt calm. I thought about my dad, how he'd hated bureaucracy, how he always said, the moment someone tells you what color your fence should be, you've already given up too much freedom. I smiled, hearing his voice in my head. He'd be proud. Inside the house, my computer pinged a new email notification. The subject line read, Dominion Holdings, Final Transfer Report. For a split second, my pulse jumped. But when I opened it, it wasn't from Dominion, it was from Agent Ramirez. Attached was a document confirming all remaining Dominion assets had been seized. The message beneath it was short. You closed one door, Jason, but you also opened a lot of eyes. Thanks for not giving up. I sat back, exhaling slowly. Maybe peace had finally arrived. The next morning, I drove past the old clubhouse one last time. The building looked smaller, now stripped of authority and arrogance. The HOA sign had been removed completely. In its place, someone had spray-painted in big, uneven letters, "Power belongs to the people." I laughed out loud. As I drove away, I saw the mail truck again, same young driver waving at me. "Morning, Mr. Campbell," he called. "Morning," I said, smiling. "Thanks for the delivery." He grinned. "Just doing my job, sir." And for once, in Maplewood Estates, that simple act mail being delivered to the right person felt like the purest form of justice there was. Sometimes corruption doesn't come kicking down your door, it smiles from across the cul-de-sac and waves a clipboard. It hides behind rules, bylaws, and community standards, convincing you that control is the same as safety. But Jason Campbell's story reminds us that the smallest act of resistance, a camera on a porch, a man saying no to abuse of power, can unravel entire systems built on lies. Evil rarely starts big. It starts with someone believing they're entitled to your compliance, your property, or your silence. But truth has a way of burning through bureaucracy, no matter how many layers of paperwork it hides behind. When you see something wrong, document it. When they threaten you, stand firm. And when justice finally knocks open the door. Because the world doesn't change through heroes, it changes through ordinary people who refuse to be quiet. Comment where you're watching from, share your own HOA story, and subscribe for more true HOA dramas, where justice always gets delivered.